네.
等会儿。
Good morning, dear colleagues, and welcome back. Our plan for this plenary session is as follows. First, continue CRP 3 on the recommendations of the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, followed by CRP 1 on the knowledge management component of the framework. Then CRP 5, new program of work and institutional arrangement. As you may recall, we start our discussion on this CRP 3 paragraph by paragraph, but we could not conclude it due to the time constraint yesterday. I would like to urge all of you to continue the collaborative and constructive spirit that has guided our work so far. On this CRP, we led the discussion on paragraph, the second preamble paragraph, and I wish to start from here. I would like to open the floor to hear more further views on this paragraph after intervention by yesterday afternoon. Now the floor is open. Since there is no party, I gave to UNPFII first. Yeah, but they come earlier. Yeah.
Señores copresidentes, hermanos y
Thank you, Co-Chair, dear brothers and sisters of the indigenous nations and their delegates. Thank you for giving me the floor. I'm taking the floor at this part of the discussion since it is about an item pertaining to CRP3 as a whole. This is a general document and also contains some operational paragraphs. I am speaking as a member of the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Questions at United Nations. This Permanent Forum for Indigenous Matters would like to express its thanks to the special working group, open-ended working group, between the sessions on Article 8J and related provisions on the CBD in order to study the recommendations of the 20th and 21st and 22 and 23 sessions held in those years. Those decisions are in documents CBD/WG8j-12/7. As we had pointed out, the establishment of the Permanent Forum is the result of a consensus between the state parties showing a will to joint adjustment proposals to document CBD-WG8j-12/7 have not been accepted, and the Permanent Forum has been presenting recommendations that emanated from the forum, however. And these are the recommendations of the indigenous people from the 7 socio-cultural regions of the world. I would like to repeat the proposal for having the test adjusted in document CBD/WG8j/12/CRP3 in the following way. These are the changes. Having examined the Secretariat note on the recommendations of the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Matters pertaining to the CBD, 1. We request the Secretariat to organize a meeting of an ad hoc expert group on the implications and consequences of confusing Indigenous people with other members of society within the overall biodiversity framework. And we recommend developing specific actions in order to avoid such confusion in the future. The participants in the ad hoc expert group meeting include the parties, the indigenous peoples, and the 3 UN mechanisms related to indigenous peoples. That is to say, the Permanent Forum for Indigenous Matters, the expert mechanism on the rights of indigenous peoples, and also the special rapporteur on the rights of indigenous people, as well as entities of the United Nations that are interested in this matter. And we would recommend that the results of this meeting be reported to the Permanent Forum. We'd also request of the Secretariat a report that would facilitate the application of the Kunming-Montreal Convention in keeping with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. 3, we would invite the parties to consider the report of the ad hoc expert group at its next session. This presentation will be made available to the Secretariat in writing, and we will closely follow all of these crucial matters. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your intervention. I give the floor to DRC.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is taking the floor at this stage on behalf of the African Group. With regard to CRP3, if I may, Chair, we regret to note that some paragraphs of this document, CRP3, seem to have the seeds of separation, may I even say discrimination. It's with regret, as I've said, that we have seen that there are some trends in separating local communities from indigenous peoples. Chair, we've come from very far, very, very far away. And the indigenous peoples and local communities part of our work is the vital part of our work, a determinative, essential, undeniable part of our work, part and parcel of our work, right? So for us to continue our work and for us to reach our objectives. So if we wish to preserve biodiversity and sustainably use bioresources, then it is a matter of considering, and allow me to reiterate here, considering local communities and indigenous peoples as one single, indivisible group. Because if we are to enter into the argument of separating these 2 different bodies, which are one single body, then we will have we will enter into a debate which will get quite sticky, and we're ready to go there if others wish to, but that would be just signing the death wish of this work, and would hinder us from not only not achieving the goals of the convention and its protocol, but also not achieving the Kunming-Montreal framework. So that is the reason why Africa would request that all paragraphs that, once again, have these little mentions of separating these two very important groups be deleted. Those references should be deleted. So that's for CRP3 paragraph, recalling that the framework needs to be implemented pursuant to international instruments, including the Declaration of the United Nations on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and related human rights. Here, nothing from the framework can be interpreted as reducing or limiting the rights that Indigenous peoples benefit from or may benefit from in future. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Merci beaucoup. I give the floor to Togo.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. We are concerned by the matter, and we're going to go back now to the principle of the underlying convention. We will have to take into account the terminology used by the convention, and here we're talking about indigenous peoples and local communities. And I said it yesterday, even if there have been decisions of the United Nations which speak of indigenous peoples, we need to, that within the work of the CBD, demonstrate the topicality of keeping these two groups together. And so therefore I support the statement that has just been made by my distinguished colleague from the DRC on behalf of the African group. And I would also like, with regard to this paragraph, add after indigenous peoples and local communities, because we're talking about the rights that cannot be limited, not reduced, not inhibited, as relates to indigenous peoples and local communities. So again, we would add local communities. This needs to be implemented pursuant to international instruments, that paragraph, and then at the end it would say the rights which indigenous peoples and local communities could benefit from in future. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Merci. I give the floor to Indonesia.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity of giving Indonesia the floor. We second what have been said by our colleague from DPR and Togo, that our focus now is to implement what it has been said by the CBD and also the result that we achieved at the last COP. And then the convention has been made acknowledging both IP and ALSI, and also this has been made as the reference at the other international conference and also other multilateral forum. So if we want to separate these two, I'm afraid we lose our focus. Instead of we focus ourselves to implement and like to make progress, but now we coming back and then to have like endless debate about like whether this should be together or should be not together, and then this could be I think it's diverting our attention and focus. Instead of now it's our focus to move forward and then to bring benefit to developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Guatemala.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning to one and all. Chair, I think it's very important in regard to this subject for us to remember that there is an international human rights framework, and that within that international human rights framework, we have the human rights of indigenous peoples. The fact, Chairman, that the specific rights of indigenous peoples are recognized today as a particular social community is not a haphazard result. This is the result of a year-long struggle by the indigenous peoples themselves. In this connection, the United Nations system has created a scaffolding in order to address the issue of these rights, and thus the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Matters was created. And it is there that an analysis is made of how the different member states of the United Nations should foster those rights. Unfortunately, Chair, we have seen the way in which some states, in order to undermine the rights of indigenous peoples, have been denominating such indigenous peoples as local communities. Therefore, we consider, Chair, that indeed a step forward has been taken within the CBD when we now consider indigenous peoples as well as other relevant stakeholders for the conservation of biodiversity, and we consider them the local communities. Therefore, the document before us, Chair, fully covers that meaning in the paragraph where it says, recalling that in the Kunming-Montreal framework, etc., the paragraph makes a specific reference to indigenous peoples and local communities because we are working within the context of the convention. Let us not forget, Chair, that the title of the document says Recommendations from the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Matters to the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Therefore, the paragraph that says also recalling that the framework must be implemented in keeping with the international provisions, etc., among which we have the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the rights and human rights. In the sense that nothing provided within the framework should be interpreted as undermining any of the rights of indigenous peoples or any of the rights that they have or may acquire in the future. That paragraph is properly drafted, Chair. The second paragraph that also refers to this same subject is also properly drafted because it makes proper and specific reference to indigenous peoples. So I would like to invite our colleagues to work with clarity in understanding these concepts and in understanding the context in which we are working. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Uganda.
Thank you, Chair. I want to support the statement that has been given by DRC on behalf of Africa and also Togo and Indonesia. Chair, we are jeopardizing the work of saving our biodiversity if we proceed to the exclusion of local communities. In many parts of the world, the local communities are at the forefront of conservation of biodiversity. And so I do not think that we should proceed by excluding or diminishing the rights of local communities and going against the objectives and aims of the CBD. As already noted, the language in the convention is indigenous peoples and local communities. Anything that separates the two will be diminishing the rights of one group against the other. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Togo again.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to react to what's been just said by Guatemala by stating the following. With regard to the title and what we said in our opening remarks yesterday, we did touch upon it. We're not talking about preserving the title as is. The title should be revised. We would therefore be talking about indigenous questions, and therefore we should talk about indigenous peoples and local communities within the convention. That's what is appropriate, I think. So we would insist here that we are in a very particular context, which is that of preserving biodiversity. And within this context, we must take into account the fact that the two terms are equal. If we're in a country where we have indigenous peoples, that we're going to use indigenous peoples. And if we're in a country where there are local communities, then we're going to use the term local communities. So we're not talking about changing or switching up the terminology because it's an existential issue. In different states, we can't change the structures. It's what it already exists in the countries. And so all we should do here is adjust the terminology so that in the countries where we use local communities, we continue to use local communities. We don't call those people indigenous people all of a sudden. Can you imagine what would happen if we did that? Under the framework of the convention, when we use indigenous peoples and local communities, that was a much broader agreement such that each state could apply the terminology which belongs to it. And therefore for the measures to take for indigenous peoples and local communities, depending on what they have, right? So we don't have any issue with that. And therefore the title should be revised to take into account these two parts to make sure that we are in the context of the CBD. I thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to EU.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We understand that we have different points of view and perspectives concerning the language that should be used in this second paragraph, which begins with recalling also that the framework, etc. We take due note of these differences, Chair, and we understand the arguments and concerns that have been put forward from those various perspectives. But we also take note of the fact that we are dealing with a preambular reminder paragraph that refers to the global framework. And thus, with the purpose of moving forward with today's discussions, since we still have quite a bit of work ahead of us, we would like to suggest a possible simplification of the text. On our end, our preference would be, if the text is maintained, for it to be maintained as it stands, because this is the same language that we see in the global framework. However, if this does produce difficulties for some generations, for some delegations, we would like to propose a possible alternative, which would be to replace this entire paragraph with a paragraph stating as follows, in English.
The Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, in particular, its paragraph 7A. Pues es de aquí de donde viene este.
Here is where this text in this CRP comes from, and it's a cut and paste and basically contains the language that we want to reproduce, which is the link with the global framework. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to my indigenous co-chair. June, you have the floor.
Thank you, co-chair. I just want to say that I hear the interventions from the African states and also Indonesia. I am an indigenous person from Asia, so I understand your concerns in regards of indigenous peoples and local communities. For myself, when I read the UNDRIP, it does not extinguish rights of local communities. So I agree with European Union. I think we should recall second paragraph and replace it with the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework of Section C, 7A, that emphasizes on the UN, the UNDRIP of the UNDRIP, international instruments. So I hope that clears up the concerns that were expressed from the African states and Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you, co-chair. I give the floor to Norway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Norway takes note of the intervention from the Permanent Forum to move away from the use of the term indigenous peoples and local communities on the ground that indigenous peoples with special rights do not want to be equated with an as yet undefined category, local communities. The Norwegian position remains that the commonly used indigenous peoples and local communities as used in international contexts does not imply a juxtaposition as far as rights are concerned, but it is more to be understood as a compromise between those parties in international cooperation who recognize indigenous peoples and those who do not, at least not within their own borders. The consequence of moving away from the current use of indigenous peoples and local communities in international contexts, therefore, can be unclear, both with regard to making further progress in the recognition of indigenous peoples, but also for amicable international cooperation with those parties, not yet prepared to recognize the distinct rights of indigenous peoples. Norway therefore maintains its position to simply take note of the recommendation from the Permanent Forum as the special rights of the indigenous people made by the EU. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair.
Thank you, Norway. I give the floor to Swatini.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We are conversant of the discussions that are happening in this room, and we appreciate the discussion and the information that comes from the indigenous people. But having had the submission that is coming from the distinguished delegate from Guatemala, it makes us even wonder if do we really have to have this particular decision, this particular CRP? And it is for that reason that Eswatini would like to bracket the entire CRP. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Burundi.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. We support the statement that has been made by the DRC on behalf of the African group. Burundi has 3 ethnicities in its people, which are often compared to indigenous peoples. The indigenous peoples are currently considered as being integrated in all aspects of socioeconomic life, as has been demonstrated by the representative of UN Women Indigenous Peoples Forum. This is similar to what we've heard in other countries, and we would support the statement for joining local communities and indigenous peoples. I thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to support the comments made by Guatemala in terms of the recommendations, and this paper relates to the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, which is the name of the organisation. And so the request from Togo to include local communities would not be correct, because that is changing the title of an organisation, and it has a very clear mandate. Very supportive of the language in the preambular text as drafted and highlighted by the European Union, which is text from the Global Biodiversity Framework and crafted in a way that makes it clear when talking about the CBD, we recognise Indigenous peoples and local communities, but would also go along with the suggestion made by the European Union and supported by the co-chair as a way of moving forward. But I just wanted to reinforce we're unable to change another body's name through the discussion we're having today. Thank you.
I give the floor to DRC. Thank you, Australia.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. Chair, I would recall here that in numerous African countries, numerous state parties here, compared to that, numerous state parties here, specifically Norway, are trying to help local communities address their different needs. For example, forest example. It would be interesting to hear the same countries say that they're working with communities or components of whose identity they're not even familiar with whose identity they're not even familiar. That's kind of what's going on in Africa, right? So I would just ask to have a suspension of this meeting to have consultations, private consultations. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup. So please allow me to consult with the Secretary and be back for the feedback. Now I give the floor to Brazil. You are the first in the request which not gave the floor yesterday.
Thank you, Chair. And Brazil fully shares the concerns that were raised by the African group, Indonesia, and Norway. We would support the proposal from the European Union as a balanced approach to enable us to move forward. So we would suggest simply rephrasing the paragraph as recalling paragraph 7A of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework and adding a footnote on the reference with the decision 15/4. Thank you.
I open the floor if Brazil's compromise is accepted to all the parties. So I give the floor to Liberia.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. Liberia supports the statement is of great importance. Regarding membership of the governing body, we see a problem given that local communities, which are critical stakeholders in biodiversity resources management of our sub-region in West Africa, is to be denied based on the proposal we see. To deny that stakeholder is an issue we find it difficult to understand. We therefore plead with our colleagues for understanding that so that we can resolve this issue in everybody's interest. Liberia believes the inclusion of every stakeholder in the best way forward. Thank you, Co-Chair.
So thank you, Liberia. Then I give the floor to Secretariat. David, you have some suggestions how to improve the text?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just note that we have a lot of work to do, and we've had a lot of discussion on this issue. And of course, we've heard both the view that we don't want to divide indigenous peoples and local communities. At the same time, we want to make sure we respect the rights that each have. And indeed, we have in the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Section C, a number of cross-cutting issues that were agreed to be very important and apply to the whole Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. The two first preambular paragraphs here are derived from that, but perhaps by splitting and the text into two, the balance that is achieved in the original text agreed in Montreal may be disturbed. So the simplest thing to do along the lines of the proposal just from Brazil would be actually to replace both preambular paragraphs with a simple statement recalling paragraph 7A of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Then we don't have to interpret or reinterpret what the parties agreed already in Montreal as part of this framework that is guiding all of our work right now. So perhaps, Mr. Chair, the working group might want to go forward on that basis so that this CRP can be concluded. I just note that we have also other CRPs to come, including, of course, the very important work on the program of work and institutional arrangements. Thank you.
So is all the party acceptable with Brazil proposal supported by the Secretariat? So I give the floor to Mexico.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. I would like to state my agreement with the proposal by the Executive Secretary and precisely with the understanding that there is a mandate for the permanent forum and that we cannot change that mandate. I believe, Chair, as has already been said several times, and that the Montreal Convention text cannot be changed. I don't want to be that creative. I just wanted to state our agreement with what was pointed out by Guatemala and to state our agreement with the solution that has been put forward both by the EU, by Brazil, and now by the Executive Secretary. Thank you.
Okay, since we have a long list and we have a lot of program to proceed today, so I would like to suggest all the speakers, you turn off your microphone, then we see any objection for the secretarial proposal, compromise proposal for this solution. Please, yes. So, DRC, Togo, if I see you're not turn off, it means I understand you have objections. If you have objection, please take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We take note with regret of the fact that we are attempting to twist the rules. I would like to remind you of Rules 33 and 36 that govern our proceedings. And as I said, Africa has requested the meeting to be suspended. However, you seem to prefer to break the rules, sir.
Togo, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. In regard to my previous statement, I would like to share the concern just expressed by our colleague from the DRC. We believe that after his statement, his request would be accommodated in order to allow for consultations. So, in spite of that, we believe that the proposal that has been made is indeed a step backwards, although we are now trying to look at how to apply a written provision. And it turns out that the document that we are studying contains the seeds for disagreement or separation. Otherwise, what is the purpose of the draft document? If we want to have a specific action for indigenous peoples and local communities, we see that one of the principles, this is a principle that has been present in the documents and in all of the actions that we have undertaken. So we would like to know what the precise objective of this draft document is, and for this reason, Togo joins the proposal that we have heard beyond suspending the session, putting the whole paragraph, the whole document in brackets, please. Thank you.
Okay, merci beaucoup. So we suspend the meeting for 5 minutes for consultation. We will be back this issue after 5 minutes for consultation. Dear colleagues, let's resume the meeting. After consultation, I would like to invite African group. Is any compromise proposal you can propose for the process? I give the floor to African group.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. After consultation with the African group, and we've decided that we have a number of questions on the reasons behind, the motivation behind, the objectives of, and really the end all desired result of this document. We haven't found enough answers to those questions, and we therefore haven't found the proper basis of this document as part of our work with regard to the Convention on Biodiversity. So we recognize, of course, the need for a standing body on indigenous peoples, no question there. And we would encourage the use of the concepts that have already been accepted by the CBD. Chair, Africa has taken note of the proposal that has been made by the European Union and supported by Brazil. But that doesn't really give answers to the questions that we have asked previously, and that is the reason why we were not able to advance in the work of the session, and we don't have enough time to have debates, deliberations here within our work. That is why Africa would request that we would bracket the entire document, and then we continue on with our meeting. Thank you very much.
Now I open the floor. Any objection to Africa's proposal, compromise proposal, to put the full paragraph 2 in brackets?
No, the whole
document.
There's no party objection. We can.
Oh, okay, there is no objection from the party, then we agree. Colombia?
Thank you, Chair. Bearing in mind the proposals that we have heard in the room, Colombia, on behalf of GULAC, would like to support the proposal by Brazil to replace para 2 of this document, CRP3, and replace it with a reminder to paragraph 7 of the GBD document. And thus, we would suggest maintain the CRP with the change that I have proposed. Thank you.
Guatemala, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Guatemala does not agree with putting this whole document in brackets, and thus we would like the document to be maintained as such, but with the proposal that we have heard by Brazil and backed by GULAC. Thank you.
Okay, since we still have consensus, I would like to propose, as African suggests, that we put a blanket for the whole document from the conference of the party and leave to the further consultation in COP16. So I just ask the floor, is any option, because we don't have other compromise. So someone have an objection? If not, I will give the floor only for the party with objection. Canada.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. And we've been listening attentively. We're certainly disappointed if we have to put the whole document in square brackets. We thought that the proposal from the EU supported by Brazil was a good way forward. But more than anything, I think this makes us realize how important dialogue is and how we need to find spaces for dialogue going forward, perhaps even outside of this convention, to have, I think, real conversations about how similar we are in many, many ways and how different we are in other ways, and how to resolve those issues and find a way forward. And we look forward in the months we have before COP to find those spaces to have those dialogues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Canada. Chile.
Thank you very much, Chair. As a country, we too believe that it's not the most adequate thing for the whole document to be put in brackets. In that regard, we think we could move forward constructively through the proposal put on the table by Brazil and backed by GRULAC as well as by other delegations. We also agree with what has just been stated by Canada in the sense that we do need to continue forward with the dialogue and to move forward with the building of a common understanding in spite of our differences, but bearing in mind what we have in common and brings us together and allows us to work together in the framework of this convention. Thank you.
Thank you. Constructive intervention from Canada and Chile. But we already know there is no consensus at this moment. And also we all aware we need more dialogue in the later on. That will be very helpful. But at this stage, it's for sure after many, many hours consultation, we won't be able to achieve agreement. So far, that's the only solution to put blanket for the whole text, and we encourage the further dialogue and discussion to solve this issue. We still have time before COP15. Otherwise, we don't see any option, so we have to close this session for the next paragraph. Thank you. Now we go through paragraph 3. Okay, sorry. We go to another CRP 1. This, we start there with. Okay, CRP1 is updated to draft knowledge management component of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, CBD-WG8j-12 CRP1. So we start the recommendations submitted by the co-chair. And so we go through the paragraph 1, take note of progress. Any comments on this paragraph? I see none. Then we go through paragraph 2. Request the Executive Secretary. Any comments? I see no. Then we go through paragraph 3. Recommends that the subsidiary body. So no comments. We will not go through the annex, so we all agree on this document without any objection. So it is adopted. Then we turn to last CRP document, development of a new program of work and institutional arrangement on Article 8J and other provisions of the Convention related to indigenous people and local communities. CBD-WG8j-12 CRP5. Before we move to the consideration of CRP5, I would like to invite the Secretariat for an announcement. Secretariat, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you know, this document was uploaded early this morning. We just noticed two very minor editorial issues. There was a reference in task 1.4 in the annex, which was a note to ourselves that this was an issue that was unresolved, so please ignore that note. And also in task 2.3, there is a bracket that should not be there at the end, but these are just two minor editorial mistakes that were lost in the track change. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. Now I would like to invite Ms. Matilda Wilhelm and Ms. Lucy Melankin, co-chairs of the contact group, on item 6 to report on the progress in the contact group discussion. Co-chair, you have the floor.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I think would like to give first to my co-chair, Matilda, to give a short report, then I'll compliment on what we have. Mr. President, co-chairs, delegates, I think we had a progress report which we already have, that we were successful in completing some of the tasks last night, and I think I'll give to my co-chair to report, and then we see.
Sweden, co-chair.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, co-chair Lucy. And first of all, thank you to all the participants, the delegates that engaged in our discussions, and we're happy that we did make progress in our last session last night. So we have a program of work that we managed to go through the whole annex. There are still a few remaining brackets in the text, but we're still very happy with the outcome that we managed to find understanding in many of the important elements, including the various principles and objective. We did not go through the decision text, and there you will see that there are two of the tasks that were originally in the elements that were moved now as draft recommendations. So with that, I thank everyone very much for the collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I thank you all for your hard work on this. I would like to thank you for the hard and the difficult work that you did in coming to this very important outcome. You have worked very hard in many sessions of the contact group and have managed to achieve the unprecedented result, which I wish to congratulate for bearing this in mind, and with the understanding that further work will be undertaken at the conference of the party as 16th meetings. I invite you to approve this document as is, and wish to thank you all, particularly the members of the contact group and able co-chairs for the fantastic job done. I thus invite you to approve this document as is. I give the floor to Norway first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So first, I reiterate that Norway supports the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body for 8J issues. We had the hope that we could have had a clean text in this meeting, also on the work program. However, we think through negotiations in the contact group that the content of the work program is approaching being void of content and has been watered down and is not ambitious enough. And we therefore Norway therefore reserve our position on the content of the work program so that we can start afresh at COP16. Thank you.
Russian Federation.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So first of all, before I come to substance, first of all, I'd like to thank and recognize the great job done by two co-chairs, and I believe that both of them, they deserve a good round of applause. They run those difficult contact groups in the late hours in a very good faith, with respect, and extremely professional. Co-Chair, you're inviting us to consider the entire document. We can't do it, unfortunately, as this time we faced absolutely unacceptable and unprecedented situation. None of our major suggestions made, including through the first plenary with a written submission, are reflected in the text. We don't understand. Each of them we repeated 3 to 5 times, and they are not reflected there. We can't work with document like that at all. We can't consider the document which has the major element provided by a party. One delegation, one-man delegation party in this case, working through all night without even seeing the results of its work. Since 1999, my participation in the convention, I don't remember a single example of this approach. So we are very much puzzled how to proceed with this CRP in this situation. Of course, we may offer a couple options. Our preferred option will be that Secretariat is doing what was requested to do many times and reissue Ref 1 with our suggestions being included. Of course, we also can go paragraph by paragraph through this document. And unfortunately for us, I need to do this job for the 6th time to include the language, square brackets, etc., what we need. So in this way, I'm in your hands. So, but again, we will also make a statement to this point at the closure of the meeting with a request to include it into the report of the meeting, because again, we do not remember the situation like that. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. And Brazil would like to thank the two co-chairs of the contact group for the hard work in leading us through this discussion. As we had the chance to say in the plenary, Brazil supports the establishment of the subsidiary body on Article 8J, and we welcome the opportunity to have further discussions on the topics of the modus operandi that we do not have a chance to engage with during this session of the working group. As an editorial correction, we'll notice that in the annex related to the proposed modus operandi of the subsidiary body, in section 1 on functions, paragraph 1, according to our recollection in the first sentence yesterday, there were two proposals that we're now seeing missing in the document. And there were suggestions from Brazil and also from the European Union. Brazil had inserted a reference to, in a manner consistent with the mandates of SUBSA and SBI, at the end of the first sentence of paragraph 1. And I believe the European Union had proposed some alternative language in this regard. I don't recall exactly the language from the European Union, but I believe that the Secretariat has those two proposals, as we had suggested yesterday, that we would prefer to keep both options at the table for further consideration. So we would request this editorial correction to make sure that those two proposals are included for further consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you. DRC.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, for giving me the floor. We welcome with satisfaction the document which is currently submitted, CRP 5. Chair. When we came up with the working groups, or the contact groups rather, who worked on this document, you gave them two main mandates. The first mission was to come up with a program of work for Article 8J, the new program of work, based on the recognition of the importance of the role played by indigenous peoples and local communities in the preservation of biodiversity and the sustainable use of its resources. Chair, with regard to that first mission, the contact group worked indefatigably and uninterrupted. We left the room actually this morning at 1 in the morning. So, Chair, we worked constantly without rest. The Secretariat really was giving its all. The co-chairs that we had were working with a spirit of consensus and fairness and equity when giving the floor to different parties. So the text was analyzed, Chair, with support and words of support from most parties, the majority of parties, not all parties, but most parties. When it was accepted in the contact group, it was reflected on the screen. And when we concluded the analysis of the program of work, Chair, all parties were unanimous in the contact group, unanimous within the contact group, and the contact group had the necessary solidarity, the pertinence with activities that were agreed. We even analyzed activities which took place with parties which related to the Secretariat, activities relating to the working group itself, the contact group itself. So what I would like to do here, Chair, is to encourage parties and other stakeholders to not make two separate views, two separate eyes, if you will, of one face, right? In the contact group, you're showing one side of your face, and in the plenary, the other. That would not foster progress for our work. Now, with regard to that first mission that I mentioned, the contact group did validate the program of work. Moreover, Chair, you gave a second mission to this contact group, which was to give opinions on institutional arrangements. Institutional arrangements would consist first of having a type of analysis of the possible options for the institutional arrangements. Analysis was done. 3 options were presented, Chair, and you will recall that in the opening of the first plenary, many parties took the floor on that issue and said that they supported the creation of a subsidiary body. Specifically, it was recognized that there is a need to capitalize on the experience that has been acquired by the contact group in trying to achieve the objectives of the convention. And so we believed that it was now the question of creating in a formal manner, this working group as a subsidiary body, transform it into a subsidiary body. And the DRC also supports that, the creation of that subsidiary body. Now, unfortunately, because of a lack of time, we were not able to analyze fully those aspects, but it's the second mission, the second objective that wasn't completed by the contact group, but still, with regard to the program of work, everything was completed, everything was validated by the contact group. I thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I give the floor to Togo.
Monsieur le Président.
Chair, we would like, in our statement, to thank and congratulate the co-chairs who did excellent work. The deliberations were not easy at some points in time, but they really helped us and allowed us to arrive at the excellent results that we have. We would like to note here that the document as presented and say that we are, as Togo, in favor of this document. We support it. And we welcome, therefore, the creation of the subsidiary body, for which we believe, Chair, we believe it's an important element in order to allow indigenous peoples and local communities to fully contribute or have their role in the accomplishment of the objectives of the convention. Chair, we would, however, like to clarify here that Togo has concerns with regard to a number of aspects. which have remained in the document, even if we, in our interventions, would have liked to see the deletion, because we actually didn't see the relevance of some of those activities with regard to the plan of work. But given that it was something that remained in brackets, we believe that that will allow us to continue our exchanges on this issue, and we could perhaps understand the relevance of having such activities. So I'm talking about 6.3 here, for example, and I know that other countries understand what I'm talking about. And this position reflects the position that has been expressed since this morning, our concerns that we've expressed even on other documents, because the thing is that we have these concerns that is going to have impacts on other documents as well. So we would like to maintain this position that we voiced as presented by Africa. And Chair, we'd like to underscore our concern with regard to this issue of the separation of the two terms, indigenous peoples and local communities. Chair, we understand the concern of the Russian Federation with regard to the statement that they've made. We share their concern, and we would like to perhaps support what they've said, which is, or the proposal, which is as follows. Look, it's important for all countries to be able to express themselves, and if there's an objection that's made or a statement is made, it's really important to capture it, even if it just means having brackets. If the Russian Federation doesn't find its interventions perfectly reflected in the document, then we would suggest, perhaps, Chair, that it could submit its proposals. Again, as he has said, it would be difficult because he's alone and he's made significant efforts already. But we could perhaps accept the document with his observations attached. So what we'd like to say, Chair, is that we endorse this document with the reservation just with regard to the comments that we've just made. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I give the floor to Guatemala.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. We too would like to express our gratitude for the excellent work done by the contact group co-chairs. Indeed, those were rather interesting and exhausting sessions. That said, however, I think they were well focused on producing a document that would indeed take on board the different perspectives of the parties on the relevant points. I would like to state for the record that as a country, we agree with the establishment of a subsidiary body, and for that reason, we would like for that relevant part of the text to not be left in brackets. We understand that there are other countries that are concerned with the financing aspect, but that said, the CBD Executive Secretary showed us how efficiently the resources are being used. So we believe that the financial aspect will not be a problem, but rather that we should be focusing on the modus operandi of this subsidiary body. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Chile.
Thank you, Chair. Chile welcomes the efforts by the Secretariat and by the contact group co-chairs for developing a new work program and also for institutional arrangements on Article 8J. Very specifically, we'd like to thank the efforts of the various delegations in order to produce a constructive dialogue and to show sufficient flexibility in order to move forward in a somewhat complex task, especially after long days of work. As an editorial draft, we would like to say that Chile presented a modification under number 6, general principles, and there was no objection in the contact group, and there were comments in the same sense on that draft modification by the delegations. However, we are surprised to see that that change is not reflected in the present document. We would welcome this omission being corrected, in particular in para 6 under general principles, right after the second mention of indigenous peoples and local communities. Chile formally requests the inclusion of the following text.
With national legislation. Stop. Este texto refleja.
This text, Chair, clearly reflects the language used in para 21 of the KBMG Convention, and that is why we would like for the regrettable omission that has been done in the text to be corrected in keeping with Chile's proposal, because it is in keeping with the Conference of the Parties text, and this without refusing to any reservations that may come up subsequently. We would also like to point out that in the case that future intersessional work is conducted in order to advance with the work program, we consider it very important to ensure effective and regionally balanced representation in order to permit our representation in equal conditions to everybody else at such proceedings. Thank you.
Now I invite Swatini to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. We also want to appreciate the efforts of the co-chairs of this working group for the fantastic work that they have done in the course of the days we've been here. And we also appreciate the effort that went on in the preparation and also in the discussions that led to CRP 5. We do recognize, co-chairs, that there are several issues that have not been concluded in this particular meeting. And we also recognize that there exist clear divergences in that regard. We believe that there is need to continue the work in COP and to advance the progress that we have made here in both the new work program and also in the institutional arrangements. We strongly believe that all we need is time to find each other and capitalize on the many convergences that we saw throughout the week in the contact groups. In that regard, we support adoption of the CRP as it is for onward transmission to the COP. We believe that during the busy schedule of the COP, we will find time and advance work and even clean some brackets in the document. Finally, Chair, we would like to declare our preference on the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body on Article 8J, and we believe that such will be a real emphasis on our collective commitment as a convention in addressing existing challenges faced by IPLC in implementing biodiversity conservation and sustainable use initiatives. I thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Canada.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to thank the parties and representatives from Indigenous peoples and local communities and other stakeholders who participated in the contact group session this week. We really appreciated the contribution of the member in seeking to converge our perspective and our position to agree on an outcome for the future of the implementation of Article 8J. We wonder if we could use this time left in this plenary session to carry forward this collaboration and finalize some element. As mentioned by the DRC, we had some extensive discussion on the work program, and perhaps spending some time on the decision text that we had not fully addressed might be interesting here. This would be an opportunity for reviewing text that may have been omitted. And so we would urge you to consider this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Colombia.
Thank you, Chair. Colombia supports the establishment of the subsidiary body and the importance of indigenous peoples and local communities, as well as their role in the implementation of the Biological Diversity Convention, in particular Article 8J and the related provisions. We would like to recognize the work undertaken within the framework of the contact group, recognize the work undertaken by the co-chairs and by the Secretariat, as well as by ourselves as parties to that group. And we'd also like to recognize the IPLCs and other observer organizations that participated in all of the contact groups until very, very late indeed. We believe that significant work has been undertaken by sitting down for the first time among the parties to work together, and also taking into account the inputs of indigenous people and local communities and other organizations, as well as international relevant organizations in order to reach an agreement concerning the global biodiversity framework as agreed upon in COP15. However, we believe there are several levels of discussion of the subjects included in this CRP. As regards the program of work, we had a detailed discussion of the 8 elements, and we believe that the positions of the parties should be reflected as they took place in the discussion, as well as the discussion in the contact groups. In several cases, a consensus language was achieved. And as you can see in the CRP document, there are some parts of the text that are still in brackets because no agreement was reached. That said, we believe, Chairman, that some of the discussions that took place are not totally reflected in the CRP, as other delegations have stated. For example, Colombia requested moving para 10 of section 4 to below number 7. And in the CRP, it is not positioned that way. So we believe that a more careful review of the contact group's discussions should take place, and the document should be modified accordingly. We also would like to see reflected the various options that were proposed, because in spite of a discussion taking place on 3 options, a discussion that lasted for several months or even years, the fact of the matter is that the contact group discussions still points at the fact that we have divergent points of view in that regard, and I think that should be duly reflected in the relevant part of the CRP document. Therefore, Chairman, we would request the Secretariat to work with the co-chairs in order to make sure that this state of play is reflected in the document. We would also like to request of the Secretariat that it review, on the basis of the decisions leading to the SBI and the sub-establishment, that they review that modus operandi in order to include in this proposal any relevant provisions, and to facilitate that the parties can hold better discussions on these subjects. All of the above, Chair, will have to be discussed during the intersessional period, ensuring, as was stated by Chile, the participation of all parties, relevant stakeholders, indigenous peoples, and also we'd like to support what Brazil said concerning the modus operandi and the time required to review that modus operandi. This would result in a better document and a clearer document for us to work with at the next COP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Cuba.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. The Cuban delegation would like to express its gratitude concerning the results achieved within the group, and also thank everybody, all the delegates, for the efforts undertaken in order to reach a common understanding on subjects that were put on the table for the first time. We believe that the progress that has been achieved is praiseworthy, although there is still a long road ahead. The work of the co-chairs has indeed been praiseworthy and needs to be underscored, since they helped us to move along the road toward an understanding and to bring our positions somewhat closer in spite of the difference. However, we would like to say that in spite of the progress achieved, there are still a number of subjects that need to be discussed. As has been already said in this room, not all of the discussions that were undertaken are reflected in the document, and we think that the Secretariat should review the document in order to truly reflect the discussions that were held, and in order to ensure that all of the proposals made during the working group by the parties do appear in the text before us. Likewise, Chair, we would like to express our concern regarding the need to continue working on the review of the three options. These options were presented, but we spent a lot more time on the first option concerning the establishment of a permanent subsidiary body. We believe that we need time, Chair. We need to understand each other, and we need to go deeper into the analysis of the legal aspects that will allow us to make solid progress in keeping with the provisions in regard to our objective. We believe that this is central for us to be able to take any decision later on. Likewise, we agree with a statement by Chile and by Colombia regarding the need to ensure effective representation for any work that is conducted with a view to presenting this subject before the next COP. We need to ensure balanced representation in terms of gender and in terms of geographical representation of all of the parties to the convention. Thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving Indonesia the floor. On this agenda, we were ready to discuss extensively the text. So we were a bit concerned that the draft was offered to be adopted without extensive discussion. We still hope that it can be done during our meeting. For us, the program of work and the proposed institutional arrangement should be based on existing mandates, either by the framework or by the COP. We will not accept new proposals or new creations that are without the mandate of the framework or the COP. In this regard, we noticed that the draft still seems to prejudge the decision of the parties in this regard. For example, paragraph 1 of the institutional arrangement is already without brackets. While it was obvious during the discussion in the room, in the contract group, that there was no consensus in this regard. Not only that the term subsidiary body should be bracketed, but the whole paragraph should be bracketed. Making this paragraph unbracketed, it's prejudice to the discussion. But of course, since there was mandate for the options of subsidiary body or not, for discussion of this, we are okay to have it in brackets, as long as it is in brackets, even though there is consensus. There is no consensus yet. But on another issue, as referred to my esteemed delegates from Africa. For example, paragraph 6.3, we don't have mandate on this. We don't have mandate on any program that it seems to start to initiate the distinction or the separation between IP and LC. So in this case, we would want the whole text to be deleted, not bracketed. Hence, we would, and it's obvious from the discussion in the contact group that there was support for this proposal. But we see in the current text, these brackets are still there. We have difficulties to accept this. It's either we discuss it together again or just delete it for the time being. We urge parties not to prejudice the decision of the parties in this regard. We look forward to discuss this document right now, if necessary. Otherwise, we think the whole document should be bracketed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Indonesia. I give the floor to DRC.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. You have just now heard several interventions from states parties. And we also have just heard them. What we see come out of these deliberations are two things. The first fact is that there seems to be an undeniable amount of support on the question of urgency, the opportunity, and the need to establish a subsidiary body on 8J. And then the second fact, with regard to the program of work, there are parties who have expressed their concern with regard to the fact that their positions have not been taken into account in the document. Chair, I described the context of the work that was done in the contact group. Now, of course, perfection is not something that we can achieve. There's fatigue. There are also many things on the docket. It can happen that some of the positions that are voiced are not or are omitted, I should say, perhaps in an involuntary fashion. So what I would like to proffer here is that perhaps we should concentrate the time which remains for us to look at, for the parties who believe that there are additions to still be made to the document, to indicate where specifically those should be made, or to send them in a written form demonstrating their position on each para on this program of work or the entirety of the document, submit that to the Secretariat in order to be able to arrive at the endorsement of the CRP5 document. I thank you very much for your kind attention, Chair.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to EU.
Thank you very much, Chair. We would briefly like to repeat how it is important for the EU and its member states. I'm referring to the work of the subsidiary group and to the involvement of indigenous peoples and local communities in that work, because that's necessary in this context. We also believe in all the work that has been done over the last 5 days. For these reasons, we consider it fundamentally important to come up with a new work program on these matters and to make progress in the institutional agreements that would allow for consolidation of the work and the practical aspects that have been addressed over the years within this framework. We would like to congratulate and thank the co-chairs of the contact group for an excellent job, well done, on an issue that presented many challenges. And we'd also like to congratulate the parties as well as the representatives of the indigenous peoples and local communities that were also involved in the discussions. This has allowed us to make significant progress through many hours that we put into this work. It was a long document, Chair, a lot of content as well, and therefore a complex challenge. Yesterday, we finished our session very late, and we understand that possibly that is the reason whereby some editorial modifications did not take place, as has been pointed out by some delegations. So maybe their input was not precisely reflected as was initially agreed on the screen. On our end, Chair, we see that the task for number 1.4, in our understanding, presented two options, two alternatives. One of them was known as version 1, whereas in the present document, we only see one of those options. That said, Chair, this task, as well as the rest of the tasks that were extensively discussed and where a single compromise solution was not achieved, have been left in brackets. Therefore, we understand that there is room for maneuver in order to finalize our work during the COP, and that therefore we should make the best use of the work already done. And we believe that the CRP document is an excellent basis for that work. Therefore, we would like to support the proposal by Canada, whereby this plenary session should be used to work on the part of the text that contains the recommendation so that we can send the document off to the COP. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I give the floor to Japan.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. First of all, I'd like to echo other speakers for the appreciation of the co-chairs of the contact group, as well as participants, and very dedicated work and of the Secretariat. Japan would like to share two points. First, without any prejudice of the future discussion, we have some question. We are not sure about the proposed subsidiary body's name. It is currently Article 8J and other matters of the CBD. That means everything under the convention. So maybe for the future discussion, I'd like to have some clarification for the name of the subsidiary body. And second point, I think the implementation and the resource requirements are center of the discussion at the contact group. So in that, from that matter, for us to have more in-depth and constructive discussion at COP, I would like to request the Secretariat to prepare to examine resource requirements for the implementation of the proposed program of work on biennial basis and reflect to the budget request based on the result-based budgeting framework of the Secretariat. So I think that resource requirements should be mainly for BZ fund, but that kind of cost estimate could be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Japan. Now I give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I think we've heard a lot of comments from all parties as to the productive conversations held in the contact group, and yet there is still more work to be done to try and find more consensus or articulate the divergence in views. We've come to work. We've been working very hard under the chairship of our fabulous co-chairs. I think there is a desire from parties in the room to try and progress further discussions here and maximise the time in this working group. Alternatively, there will be much work to be done at COP, and the basis for the discussion at COP needs further work to capture the views of all parties that have been presented in this session. So, Chair, I seek guidance as to whether we progress with this document and then next steps for capturing views so that we can have conversations intersessionally or at COP. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I give the floor to Switzerland.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Switzerland would like to support what has just been said by Australia. I think that we need to take advantage of the time that we have here before us, because we know that in COP there will be very little time. We understand that there are a few days, so I would suggest that we just decide how we're going to advance in our deliberations at this stage. The Russian Federation said that, delegation said that it could perhaps go paragraph by paragraph, or as other parties have suggested, are there other things that are missing? Another idea would be to advance in our deliberations on the items that have not yet been discussed up to date. So what I would like is I'd like to invite the chair to tell us how we can move forward in a constructive fashion. I think we can, we can't get anywhere if we just continue to go in circles amongst ourselves here. There are diverse views, but I think what's missing is just time to move forward and to find a consensus on the and as many points as possible. So I would thank the chairship for giving us instructions on how we can move forward in a constructive fashion. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we still have many requests, and now I would like say after intervention from Colombia, Russia, Egypt, IPLC, the floor will be closed for consultation. Thank you. Now, Colombia, you have the floor.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll be very brief. Colombia does not agree with the CRP being put into brackets. I wanted to make that clear. We also believe that it is urgent to undertake actions in order to implement the framework, and that is why we believe Canada's and EU's proposal on continuing the discussion here, which was not discussed in the contact group, is necessary. Otherwise, we suggest leaving the elements where there is no consensus or discussion in bracket in order that they can be discussed at the COP. In addition to that, we believe that the brackets, what was discussed in the contact group, should be maintained on the annex pertaining to the work program, because we must recognize the work that has been done at the contact group and in this group here. Also, Chair, in light of the parties' positions, we would be willing to consider the Part B of the annex in brackets until we have a clear picture of what was said and until the texts are polished off a little bit more, and so we can address them in the framework of the COP. Thank you.
Thank you, Colombia. I give the floor to Russia.
Thank you, Co-Chair. So we like to thank those parties who actually understand our issue. Indonesia gave an example of one of our major concerns, which was not reflected, although was stated from the very beginning, square brackets around paragraph 1 in section B. We also have concern by some other parties who are trying to present our concerns as a desire for minor editorial changes or something what we not agree in square brackets. I like assure parties it's not the case. I'm talking only about several absolutely fundamental issues which we were promised to be included, while even some of them not shown on the screen. But we got assurance that they will captured and will be reflected in the text, and that didn't happen. Listening to a colleague from Switzerland, we may offer a slightly different approach in the spirit of cooperation and compromise. We may not need to go paragraph by paragraph, so we may simply clearly state those key concerns, and I stress the word key concerns. I will not come to edits, only the most fundamental elements which we can name here, not in a written submission to the Secretariat. We did it already. Trust is faded, so it needs to be done here at the plenary from the floor. And we need to be assured that it's captured and will appear in L document. So that will definitely save time, and again, no need to go a long way. And if we still have time, we definitely can come to other elements. We also would request Secretariat, based on what was discussed yesterday at the very end of the contact group, where I think our group agreed that it will be a clear footnotes for those paragraphs which were not considered by the contact group for the future indication for parties what didn't come through the conversation, and that means that parties will not consider it as actually agreed clean text. So that still need to be done. And we also agree with those parties who stressed that the document which is preempting the decision for 1 out of 3 options is very difficult to go with, and that we still need time to understand the efficiency of other options. Thank you, Co-Chair, and also looking forward to hear your suggestion for way forward. Thank you.
Спасибо большое.
Thank you very much.
To Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It is a pity that after all of these days, working together until very late and reach this situation, Mr. Chairman, this is the first time that a large number of indigenous people and local communities sitting together, agreeing in many things, and this is where are we now? My question is, do you think we'll have time during CUP? If you have spent 5 days now, we haven't finished the job. The time during CUP will not be in a situation or will not be able to finish the job. So we have very good proposals, whether from Switzerland, from Australia, whatever. It's just some people sit together and do 2 things. Number 1, areas of agreement. Finish it. You don't need to go further. And areas of disagreement, and see if during this time we still have tomorrow and Saturday as well. Is it possible to look at the areas of disagreement and trying to see, you know, if 60–70% of the whole work program finish while we are here, so at least during CUP, we will be sure that this work program will be accepted. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Egypt. I give the last floor to IPLC.
Thank you, Mr. President. The IIFB thanks the co-chairs for the hard, excellent, and professional work that they have done to steer the contact group to a conclusion. We think we have the beginnings of a robust program of work, and while we would have preferred to have clean text, we acknowledge that the time didn't allow us to finish it at this working group session. However, we agree that the document needs to show the work that we have done and the progress that we have made in the working group, and agree with those who have proposed a practical way forward. Mr. Chair, the KMGBF recognizes and supports the role, rights, and contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities, and we believe that the subsidiary body is the right mechanism to carry out the work. Now we have a lot of work to do before COP16, but we stand ready if the co-chairs are to decide that we need to have extra sessions to capture our progress in the document. Finally, we have a small editorial change in 6.3 Alt 2. Instead of it should be replaced by peoples when referring to the mandate holders that are enumerated in that alternative. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I close the floor for consultation with Secretary. Please stay at the room. Okay, thank you for your patience. I would like to explain how we can proceed. Let me recognize that some paragraphs in this CRP were not considered in the contact group. This includes the draft decision under Section A, and those paragraphs in Section B noted in footnote 14. We will come back to the paragraphs of the draft decision under Section A later. I would also like to recognize that some points were raised in the contact group but not reflected in the current CRP. I will invite parties to raise this point very shortly. I also recognize that there was a request for clarification regarding budgetary implications and a request to the Executive Secretary to provide this to COP16. This is how I would like to proceed. First, I will open the floor for parties to bring back text that was raised in the contact group but not reflected in the CRP. Second, the Secretariat will then issue a revised CRP which will reflect those points in square brackets. Third, in the afternoon, time permitting, we will look into the draft decision in Part A. I trust that this is acceptable. I now open the floor for parties to indicate the missing text very short, please. DRC, you have the first floor.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Chair, for giving me the floor. And thanking also for the guidelines that you've just given. I would like to perhaps just ask a clarification from your side. If we continue, then it will be up until what time? Because as we can see, we are visibly at the lunch break right now. Thank you.
We react or not?
Secretariat.
Yeah, so just 2 points actually. One, it would help us also when you give your inputs, if you can also provide it to us in writing at the same point, that is good, just so that we don't have to repeat it a number of times. We have we only have another 10 minutes actually, so to collect these points. So we hope that we can do this quickly. Then, of course, you will see them in the revised version before the afternoon session. And then, as the chair said, if there's time, we will then also go through the parts of the draft decision in Section A. Thank you.
Okay, as the Secretary said, we can take the written comments also, but only the paragraph which already raised during the contact group. Russia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Thank you for the suggestion. Again, our understanding is that for Section A, the decision you plan to come later on after lunch, so we can accept it, and those comments we have, we will reserve for after lunch. So also, as I said earlier, I will focus really on a very few main points. So it's still for Section A, but it's not for discussion, but it's what we requested many times. There are several elements of the work program which suggested to be directed to the Secretariat. We asked several times to establish a new paragraph 8, which will start with a further request the executive secretary, comma, subject to availability of resources, to. And then from the current version of the program of work, we like to move from program of work tasks 3.2, task 4.5, task 8.3. There are a few other tasks where Secretariat is mentioned, but we are ready for this moment of time to keep them there as we were discussing other actors to be engaged, so we can hopefully resolve it at COP. So, and with this portion, I will stop only with this remark and will not come to paragraph. So for section B, again, I like to reiterate that we see it really in a bad light, that our many statements clearly stating that we are not supportive of establishing an adoption of the permanent subsidy body, we are not taking into consideration, pretending to present it as agreed, because paragraph 1 is not in square brackets. How come? So please, clearly reflect that paragraph 1 is in square brackets. Then, we also suggested, and that's part of the alternative, and many parties mentioned that we didn't even consider alternatives. We added 2 additional paragraphs, paragraph 3 and paragraph 4. So the paragraph 3 would read, further decides to address the need for sufficient time allocation for items on matters of relevance to indigenous people and local communities through allocating an additional meeting time to each meeting of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, technological advice and the subsidiary body on implementation. And paragraph 4, encourage parties, other governments, and relevant organizations to provide additional support to representatives of indigenous peoples and local communities to effectively participate in the meetings of the subsidiary body on scientific, technical, technological advice and the subsidiary body on implementation. So the whole annex, I can see that it's staying in square brackets as we requested. And at this point, again, as I promised, I will not come to the text of the annex and any paragraphs, but only will reiterate again the request to clearly show in the new document those portions of the text which were not considered by the contact group. Thank you, Co-Chair.
Thank you. Indonesia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are flexible with your way forward. We are, as we mentioned before, we are ready to discuss the whole text during this plenary. And if I may seek your guidance again. So you are saying that we discuss Annex Section A after lunch, and we discuss Section B now? Is that the way forward? Or we discuss everything? So I have to convey my concerns of all the documents now, or please advise again, Mr. Chair.
Secretariat, please clarify.
So we will come back to the draft recommendation of Section A after lunch. Right now, if you see anything that you had asked to be included in the remainder of the document during the contact group, and it is not there, then please indicate that now. Thank you.
Indonesia.
Thank you, Secretariat. Okay, in that case, I would like to convey again our concerns and probably propose way out if we don't have time. As we have mentioned before, if we don't have time, a landing zone to bracket all the document is flexible for us. But if we want to try again to pursue a better unbracketed document, we would like to convey, for example, on Section A, we believe that the proposed 5.4 and 6.3 is not based on any mandate because it refers to the idea of splitting IP and LC. As we have discussed this morning, there was there was no consensus in this regard, even that the whole document was bracketed. So we don't see any basis to maintain paragraph 5.4 and paragraph 6.3, since this is related with this issue, in our opinion. And on Section B, we also would like to support the statement made by the esteemed delegation of Russia that it was obvious that in the room there was no consensus on this permanent subsidiary body. Hence, in our opinion, as we have stated before, this paragraph 1 of Section B should be fully in bracket. And paragraph 2 should also bracket also the sides, because by already agreeing also, it's already prejudicing that paragraph 1 has been agreed. So we also would like to bracket the term also in paragraph 2. And in addition to that, we still think that the following paragraph under Bureau and co-chairs, budgetary matters, focal points, and documentation also have some languages or paragraph which refers to the agreement of the subsidiary body, and we would also like to have them in brackets. We will convey the details in the discussion afterward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, and we appreciate your way forward. So as I said earlier, in the annex to Section B, on the proposed modus operandi of the subsidiary body in the Section 1 on functions, in paragraph 1, we had suggested to include our proposal, which is adding at the end of the sentence, in a manner consistent with the mandates of SUBSA and SPI. And we would also suggest retaining the proposal from the EU, which was presented yesterday for further consideration at COP16. Further down, in Section 4, on budgetary matters, we recall that yesterday we had some discussion around budget, and we had suggested to include a specific sentence, which is pretty much consistent with the modus operandi of SUBSTA, to make sure that the number and length of the meetings and activities of the subsidiary body and its organs should be reflected in the budget adopted by COP or other sources of extra budgetary funding. And we thought that this would somehow address the concerns that some countries raise regarding the potential costs of the new subsidiary body. And we'll be happy to provide those in writing for the Secretariat to capture them in the revised version. Thank you.
Thank you. Canada.
Thank you, Co-Chair. And I'm just seeking some clarification. We did have some textual proposal on the recommendation for Section A, as well as for the procedural matters, which are two sections that we haven't addressed. Would it be better if I send them through to the Secretariat in writing, or should I introduce them now? They are minors. Thank you.
So you can do both ways? Or so Canada.
Thank you, Chair. So for paragraph 4, where it says request party and invite other governments to report on progress in the implementation of the program of work, including the application of existing and relevant guidelines, we would like to add in their national reports as part of their assessment of progress in the implementation of the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework.
The interpretation service is now ending. The interpretation service is now ending.
Multiple streamline of reporting. I can repeat that, or you've captured that.
So for the paragraphs of the draft decision in Section A, we're going to come back this afternoon. So it's just the rest of the document we're looking at now.
Okay, EU, just be in mind, we have no translation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. From our side, we would like to just recall, as we have been requested, to identify issues that we find missing from what was discussed in the contact group. Under task 1.4 of the program of work, it is our recollection that after the, I believe, first session that covered the program of work of the contact group, two options were left on the table. One of the options is the one that we see now in the non-paper, which makes reference to addressing the drivers of biodiversity laws. And the other version was the one that had actually been captured under the version 1 of the non-paper, under task 1.5b of that version 1, and which referred to actions, management actions for invasive alien species, pollution, and climate change mitigation and adaptation. So we would like to have both options reflected on the document, and we can submit that to the Secretariat if that helps. Then in addition to indicate that we would also have some suggestions, I mean one particular suggestion for the draft recommendation to propose some reference to some intersessional work from here to COP, but we understand this is to be introduced in the session of the plenary later on, so we can wait for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, EU, now Brazil.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to come back again. I understand that the comments from Canada refer to the section procedural matters under the annex. We didn't have the chance actually to revise those paragraphs during the contact group. We would also have some comments, but my understanding was that we were only going to reintroduce language that was presented during the contact groups. So those additions would not actually address those paragraphs that were not revised during the contact group. Otherwise, we would also have comments on the different paragraphs that were not revised. So we would seek some clarification in this regard. We'd also kindly ask to suspend the meeting because we do not have interpretation. and some members of our delegation are not able to follow this in English, and I believe from other countries in GRULIC as well. So we would prefer to adjourn this meeting right now. Thank you.
So there's only two people asking for the floor. One is Chile. We have their comments already. They made them, I think, earlier this morning. The other one is DRC. If we don't take them now, we will not be able to prepare a revised document this afternoon. So I wonder if we have Chile's already, because I think you said it earlier. Yes. So if we could perhaps just get DRC's, we could then break and we can prepare the revised document if we can appeal to.
DRC withdraw, but we understand we could have the written comments, right? You gave the timeline, then.
We have them all now, I think. So.
Now, half hour?
We have them all now.
Okay, so we think we already have all the written comments, so the Secretariat can work during the lunch and we can resume the meeting at 3 p.m. Thank you.